Hello there, and welcome to the Meaningful Stitch. This is episode 29, and I am Amy Palko, and I'm coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland. And this is my digital home from home, a place where I get to share with you my knitting practice and my knitting projects. Now, everything that I talk about today, I have included in the show notes, which you can access by clicking on that little downward chevron just below the video, and that will open up a text box. And there you'll find a link to a Patreon post, which is free to access for everybody, and it will include photographs and links of everything that I'm referencing in today's show. So if there's a designer that you want to follow up with, perhaps some yarn, then you'll be able to find all of your answers there, I hope. Now, normally at the beginning of my episodes, I draw a card from an oracle deck or a tarot deck, and I share that with you. And instead of doing that today, I would like to move that towards the end of the episode. So if you stick around, you'll get a card draw, a little reading, and then I have an announcement to make at the very end. So I hope you'll stick around for that. But before we get to all of that, there's lots of knitting. And I'm going to start with what I'm wearing. So long-time viewers of The Meaningful Stitch may recognise this jumper. It is the Kingston. Now, I think it was back in episode 2 when I shared that I had knitted this beautiful jumper, well, not this beautiful jumper, but a jumper very similar. And then for some reason, unbeknownst to myself, I put it in the washing machine and I shrunk it. And I thought that was such a shame that I knitted another. So I call this Kingston the Second because the pattern is called Kingston. It is by Taralyn Morrison, who goes by Goodnight Day on Ravelry and Instagram. And she really specialises in these quite chunky knits. So they're knitted on large needles and with a chunky weight yarn at a very loose gauge. So they knit up very quickly. I would say that they are good patterns for beginners if you have never knitted a jumper before. Then this might be a good starter for you. But I will warn you that the very chunky needles can sometimes be a little cumbersome to work with. So, but they do knit up terribly fast. So I think I knitted this, well, I certainly knitted the first one up in the course of a weekend. And then I had to order yarn so that it would look the same as the first one and then knit it up again. So the yarn that I have knitted this in is Cascade 220. And I've held it with various different mohairs that I had in my stash. So with each stripe, I've held 2 strands of Cascade 220 with 1 strand of mohair. And then I've switched out the 220 with the next colour in order to create this kind of marled stripe that blends one colourway into the next. So we have silver grey, we have shrimp, we have pickled ginger, we have Cabernet, in fact you'll see it better here, Cabernet, which is this very kind of dark purple, and then into the black. I can actually show you what the original jumper looked like because I used the felted sleeve to make a hot water bottle cover. So it went this way around. This was the sleeve. So as you can see, I did not bad for matching up my colours to replicate it. But basically I just chopped off the sleeve. I shaped a little bit at the edge for the bottom of the hot water bottle. And I did blanket stitch badly around the end here. And the cuff is where the hot water bottle cover goes in. So actually the hot water bottle never comes out of this. I just top it up through the top there. And as you can see, I am not an embroiderer, but I did have a go. So I love my little hot water bottle cover and it matches my jumper. So there we go. That was, and I think this yarn that I used originally was an Erica Knight chunky weight. And as you can see, I just did stripes using that 1 strand of chunky. Whereas with this, with the 220, I was holding 2 strands together, and that meant that I could create this marled stripe. So perhaps this was just the first draft, and this was the final draft. Let's think of it that way. Okay, my darlings, I want to share with you a finished object. And actually, this is the reason why I am recording today, because you might know, again, if you've been watching this for a while, certainly if you've been watching this since January, I promised each of my 3 children a jumper, and they would get to co-create it with me. They could choose the colour, they could choose the design with me. I would offer up various different options, and they could give me an idea of what it was they were looking for, and then they would decide on what the final design and yarn and colour would be. So the first one that I did was for my middle son, Seb, and he chose a lovely soft sagey green colour, and we knitted I knitted the single malt by Maxim Sear, and I adjusted it because I think that original pattern is knitted for Aran weight, and Sebi wanted a much lighter weight jumper, so I modified it for a 4-ply held with a lace weight, so I suppose that's a sport weight. and he was really pleased with the result, and I gave that to him, gosh, must be back in February, March, maybe. The next one was for my daughter, who's my eldest, Aurora. You might have met her before, and she came on to talk to us about her kilt making. And she wanted a cardigan that she could wear in the kilt shop where she works. And she wanted cables and she wanted pockets. Of course she did. She is her mother's daughter. She wanted pockets. So I found the Peated Whiskey cardigan by Thea Coleman, and I held Holst Super Soft in the slate grey colourway double. And I think I've sent that to her. Well, she must have got that last month, so that would have been April. And she's been wearing it in the shop, and it's been keeping her super cozy, and she just loves it. So we started with the sage grey green. Then we went to slate grey, so a darker grey. My youngest, Xander, wanted a black jumper. So I have purposefully waited until May, until it was much, much lighter, and I was getting a lot more daylight to work with, because I just couldn't imagine trying to work with black yarn with so little daylight back in February, for example. So he wanted a kind of a textured jumper, so I decided, I showed him various options, and he decided on Albion by Michelle Wang. And it's kind of like a contemporary Gansey in that it has a all over textured pattern, and I used Holst Super Soft again, and I held it double, and of course it was in this colour here, which is black, very black. Now, I have knitted this, I've just basically knitted solely on this for just under 2 weeks, and it is off the needles. I'm blowing out terribly, but it does mean that you can see the texture. There we go. So, hi. So it is, I'll hold it up to close so you can see a bit better. You can see that there's like these chevron textured design, and the chevrons go one way and then they go the other, and that's reversed on the back. And this is basically just created through knits and purls. So you are constantly keeping your numbers of knits and purls correct. You're just moving them along, and then you're moving them back in order to create the diagonals. It is quite long. I think it's about 16, blowing out horribly again. This is going to be an issue, I think, with this particular jumper. It's 16 inches from the hem to dividing for the sleeves, and then you knit the back, and then you knit the front, and then you seam your shoulder seams, which you can see here. I did mattress stitch, which is worked out really very neatly. That's the inside. I hope you can see. And then you knit your sleeves, and you knit your sleeves from the bottom up, so from the cuff and you do all your shaping, and then you come up to here where you do a sleeve cap. So then you're working back and forth doing your decreases to create this shape for your sleeve. And then you are sewing, well, actually after I did that, I picked up to do the collar, and then I mattress stitched my sleeves into place, which I did at knit night, which was a bit ambitious, but I did get there. It was a bit of a labour of love. In fact, this whole jumper was a bit of a labour of love. That said, I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to, and I didn't have as much problems with knitting with the black yarn as I expected. So that was a relief. I have actually made a modification, which was an unintended modification. So let's call it a design feature. Basically, when you get up to divide for the sleeves, the pattern says to complete that pattern repeat. However, that took me up to here, and I thought, looking at the photograph, that it looked as though there was another pattern repeat. So I did an extra pattern repeat. Well, first of all, I did it on the back and then moved into the stockinette. But when I did it on the front, I repeated that on the front, I realised that because of the positioning of the pattern, that I then actually had my neckband beginning in the pattern, and what I should probably have done is stopped the pattern repeats here and started my stockinette from here and then knitted up. So basically that just meant that I had to keep the pattern correct while I was doing my decreases and bind offs for the neckband. But it wasn't a disaster, and actually I was showing it to my friends at Knit Night, and they were saying that they thought it actually looked better that way. So I don't know. Oh, blowing out again. Oh, hi. So I am really pleased with how it's worked out. I did really consider ripping it back out and knitting it back up with without that last pattern repeat, but I decided in the end not to do that. I do like it, and Xander does not watch this podcast, and he will never know if we don't tell him that there was not meant to be a pattern repeat. So, and I don't think he would really care anyway. So I think he is going to like it. Some things that I found, obviously with knitting with the black yarn, was that in the evenings it did become more problematic when I started to lose the light, or I started to get tired, or we were watching something on Netflix and my attention was a bit wandered. I would realise that actually I had my pattern repeat was offset, and then I would have to take some of it back, or I would have to drop some of it down. One of the mistakes that I made at the very beginning was forgetting that the front chart is different from the back chart, and I had knitted the front chart the whole way around. So that was annoying, so I had to take back the first couple of rows of the pattern repeats of the chart and redo those. And then the other big mistake that I made, it's not a big mistake, but the other mistake that I made was, and I'll need to show you the sides of the jumper to show you this, the pattern repeat, that as you move from the back chart to the front, let's see if I can show this because it's really not very easy to show it in black. Can you see that? That's when your chart switches from back to front, and you have these garter ridges which separate one repeat from the next, and up the edge you have a 2-stitch stockinette feature which goes the whole way down and connects with the 2x2 rib at the bottom. Now, I discovered, I think when I was about here, that I had actually continued my garter ridge across the 2-stitch stockinette. And again, I decided this was going to be a design feature. And so I repeated it for the second. And then I got to about here and I decided I didn't like it. So using my crochet hook, I dropped the stitches. So I dropped 4 stitches altogether, 2 on either side. I dropped them all the way down to that first place where I had knitted across, or actually I had purled across some knit stitches and replaced them with my knit stitches. So then I had the 2 stockinette stitches continuing up either side. That did, because there was so many rows to drop down, that did affect the tension. However, it has blocked out, and so you certainly wouldn't know that I had fixed that now, as you can see. So again, you know, it's these things. I try and tell myself that I can live with mistakes, and actually I must be a terrible perfectionist, because actually after a while I discover that I can't. So I did go back and fix that, and I'm glad that I did, and then I kept that straight the whole way through for the rest of the knit up to the division for the front and the back. The other thing is, when you are knitting with 2 strands or more, it can be very easy not to catch both strands in your stitches. And that happened a few times with this, and I caught it on occasion, but I did discover that there was one stitch on the sleeve, and quite far down, like far too far down the sleeve for me to drop down and correct it, where I had only caught one of the strands of the stitch. So what I did was I took the yarn, which is a 2-plied yarn, so I unplied the yarn, and so I just had 1 strand from the ply, like this. So I just took one of these, and then I basically did Swiss darning on the back and caught the strand that I hadn't caught in the stitch, and pulled it through. So then it's absolutely, I mean, it would have been unnoticeable anyway, because that is one of the good things about knitting with black yarn, is that you really can't spot mistakes anyway. But you really can't see that at all. So that was a very quick mend. I do think it was important to do that mend, mostly because to just have the 1 strand in the fabric, it would have created a weakness, and it would possibly have opened up as a hole or worn through. Xander tends to wear the jumpers that I knit for him every day. He is very knit worthy, and I have had to fix previous jumpers of his many times, and particularly on the sleeves. So it was important to make sure that little error, that little mistake was fixed, so that we didn't have that weakness in the fabric anymore. So there we go. This is the Albion by Michelle Wang. I think it was originally a pattern for Brooklyn Tweed, and the recommended yarn was Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, and that was recommended to knit it on a needle size 3.75mm needles. I knitted it on 3.75mm needles with the 2 strands of Holst, and I got gauge. I certainly got stitch gauge. I actually have a suspicion that I didn't get row gauge. I might have been just off, but that's not really a problem for this, because it was all of the lengths, rather than being measured over rows, were measured over inches and centimetres, so I could make sure that my measurements were staying correct. But I do wonder whether that is actually what created this design feature of this last extra pattern repeat. Oh, also, when you're doing these pattern repeats, after you have divided for the front and the back, you have then switched from doing the textured pattern in the round to doing the textured pattern in the flat. And that particularly, I think, was really difficult to adjust to and to really see and read your knitting, because you're looking for your knit stitches and your purl stitches, and trying to keep that correct the whole way through. And that was a little bit problematic, and I did find myself taking back my stitches and re-knitting them. One last thing, and I can actually show it to you on this strand here. The yarn I found was really consistent, apart from a little tiny section where there's like a white or undyed strand has been plied in with the dark, and I didn't notice this when I was knitting the sleeve, and so because of that I have this kind of like stripe going across the sleeve, which is more noticeable, I think, on the camera than it actually is in real life. I was hoping when I washed and blocked it that it wouldn't show up so much, but it really does, and that's a little bit disappointing. I did catch it when it happened on this sleeve, so it's just very slight, and that's when I ripped off that bit of yarn and I rejoined using a split splice. But that was a little bit disappointing, so that I have this. But then, let's just call that a design feature too, hey? So yes, that's a little bit disappointing, just that flaw in the yarn. And certainly, you know, I've knitted extensively with Whole Super Soft and I've never had that problem before. So I don't know, maybe you have, maybe that's something that you've come across before, but really having that kind of flaw in the yarn was not something that I had encountered before from Holst. So, and because I was knitting it at night time, or, you know, I just wasn't paying attention, I do have this stripe. So what can you do? It just makes it unique, and it makes it a hand knitted garment rather than a machine made garment where everything is uniform. So that's fine. She tells herself. I did wash and block this the other day there. The yarn has really bloomed and really softened. My husband came over and kind of felt the fabric while I was knitting it, before I washed and blocked it, and he went, "Oh, is that going to soften up? I'm not sure Xandra will like that." And I went, "Yeah, it will definitely soften up." Whole Super Soft, as we've spoken about before, is a combination, a blend of merino and Shetland. So it is a more rustic yarn because of that Shetland component, but I find it as a lovely yarn to wear. I don't feel this is itchy at all, but if you are very sensitive to woolier wools, then maybe this Whole Super Soft doesn't quite live up to its Super Soft name, but I certainly find that it's a very soft rustic yarn. And yes, it has bloomed beautifully. I had to wash it. Gosh, I had to go put it through probably about 5 or 6 changes of water before my water was finally clear. It did, did release a lot of excess dye and spinning oil. But after I did that, I left it sitting there for about half an hour in the water, and then I squeezed out the water. I didn't wring it because you never wring your hand knits, but I squeezed out as much water as I could, and then I popped it in between 2 towels and rolled up the towel to create a big sausage, and then I stomped all along the edges of it, all along the length of it, to try and get out as much excess water as I could. And then I do what I always do when I'm blocking a jumper like this. I popped a broomstick from one sleeve all the way through to the other sleeve, and then I propped the broomstick up near the window so that it got all of that lovely May sunshine that we have been having, although today is very rainy and grey and not very nice. But before then, we did get some nice sunshine and it dried very quickly. So he is going to be coming over this weekend, which was really why, I was knitting like a crazy woman to try and get this completed. I'm really looking forward to giving it to him. I haven't shared any images of this on social media, and that is because he doesn't know that I have been working on it. He knew that I was going to be starting it, but I don't think he was expecting it before he goes away for the summer. So we're going to see him this weekend, and then he's going to head off and do some work over the summer, and then we won't see him again until early September, I think, which will be his birthday month. So I really wanted him to have this. I know this is not like typical, it's not typical garments that you would pack for your summer trip, but he might need it. He's not going to a particularly warm place, so I just wanted to give him the option if he wanted to take it. And it means that, you know, he's got something that his mum made for him and, you know, put love into, and, you know, wished him all good things, and, you know, protection and resilience, and, you know, all of these wishes that we have for our children, you know, go into every stitch in these jumpers, like these gifts. And so that is the final jumper for the children that I promised them at Christmas time. So you know what that means. That means I can basically cast on with impunity now. I have nothing to stop me from casting on all the things. And I have cast on a couple of things. So let's move on then to what's on my needles rather than what's off. And I will share with you the first thing. Now, you will recognise the yarn, but you won't recognise the project. So this beautiful wildflower yarn, it's called, this colourway is Wildflower, is by Kinross, and this is Kinross lace. I picked it up from Perth Festival of Yarn in 2021 from Wee County Yarns, which is a yarn shop and producer in, oh gosh, I'm not sure, just outside of Stirling anyway. And it's so soft, and they had a sample there at the stall, and it just felt like cashmere. It's lamb's wool, and they've only got 6 colours, I think, in the lace weight, but they have a lot more colours in the 4-ply. If you get an opportunity to try this yarn, I really, really recommend it, because it's a delight to work with, and I'm so excited to get what I'm knitting finished so that I can cast it off and wash and block it, because I know that once you do that, it softens up even more. So I am really excited about this. Now, you will, if you have watched before, then you will recognise this yarn, because I cast on the Boho Blush by Andrea Mowry, which is a crescent-shaped shawl, and it combines garter with a little bit of lace and a little bit of single colour brioche, and it's edged with a long fringe. Now, so I cast it on. I certainly knitted some garter, some lace, and some single colour brioche, and another bit of garter. But I don't know, my heart wasn't really in the project. I wasn't really enjoying the design, and I just decided, actually, while I was knitting on all of this, with all of this black yarn, and all I could think of was this gorgeous colour of, you know, lilac, that I was going to rip it back. And so at knit night, after I had finished mattress stitching the sleeves into the armholes of the Albion, I took out this project and I ripped it all back. So that's why my cake looks a little bit bound there. And I cast on instead a shawl design that I have knitted before. So you might be able to recognise it from this shape. Do you know what this is? It is a Stephen West pattern, and it is called Garter Goodness. I love Garter Goodness. I just love garter, to be honest. I've got a little stitch marker here on the front just to remind me, because when we're knitting garter in a shawl pattern, it can sometimes be a little bit confusing as to which is the front and the back. So this is how I know it's the front. It is such an easy stitch. It's such an easy design to follow is basically you've got your I-cord edges, you have your eyelets, and then you have your garter. And then after you've done so many repeats, you pop in one of these, a little stitch marker. These are from Kate, who does who's the one behind Blue Dot Yarn, and I picked up these little handmade stitch markers from her again at Perth Yarn Festival in 2021. So you pop in a stitch marker, and that's where you do your eyelet, and then your garter stitch again, and then eyelet, and then you've got your I-cord edge. And that's how you create what becomes a really beautiful shape. Now, why have I cast on another one of these? Well, I started to think that what I really wanted was just a big swathe of garter. And I wanted it to be light, I wanted it to be frothy, I wanted it to be in a solid colour. And I thought this would be a really beautiful shawl to knit on when I go on my, hopefully, my very long train journey down to France. And I just imagined myself knitting on this lovely Kinross lace in this beautiful easy pattern, just lots and lots of garter, stopping every now and again to take some video footage for you. So that's essentially why I cast on, but I thought I would show you the two other garter goodness shawls that I have knitted in the past, because this was the first one. So just so you can get an idea of what the shape will look like, and also the difference that the weight of yarn I think will really make. So this one was knitted, this is the first one I knitted. So you can see these eyelet sections, and then the repeats, and then your next eyelet increase, and then your next, as you create this beautiful shape. So here's the section that I'm on. I've like literally just started these, and there's my lovely I-cord edge. This yarn was a fade that I put together over a long period of time because I was seeing all these wonderful fade projects like Find Your Fade by Andrea Mowry, and I really wanted to kind of construct one myself, but I was going to take my time because these hand-dyed yarns are quite expensive, and I was just going to get one at a time. So that was my plan. I did actually get two at a time because I went down to London and I visited Loop, and I got some lichen and lace single ply merino, and this is Silver Fox, and then I blended it into a slightly darker shade which is called Pewter. And then I saw this, which is it's Woolen Vine, and it's in the colourway Poison Ivy. And this was really expensive yarn, not because, well, hand-dyed yarn is always expensive, and it's no more expensive than any other hand-dyed yarn, but I also had to factor in shipping and customs, and so that then really did become quite expensive. But I really wanted this effect of like a quartz boulder with moss growing up, and I thought that beautiful shade here, which is actually called Poison Ivy, was a really lovely mossy shade. But then I needed a colour that would kind of connect these two here. And so I found that at Loch Ness Knit Fest back in 2018, I think. And this is from Ripples Crafts, which is a hand dyer up on the northwest coast of Scotland. And this colourway is a Scent Storm. And it just blends so beautifully, the grey with the green. So I was really pleased with how that fade worked out. The second one that I did was also a fade, and I was over visiting my mum, and she had been to La Bien-Aimée, and she had picked up a very beautiful gift for me, which was some single ply merino from La Bien-Aimée and some beautiful mohair. And so I spent quite a long time trying to decide what pattern I wanted to cast on, and then I remembered how much I had enjoyed knitting the garter goodness, and so I decided I was just going to cast another one of those on but it meant that I was a skein short. So we popped along to My Little My, which is the yarn shop in Cognac, France, close to where my mum lives. And I found there a yarn by Tola Matin, and it was in the colourway Little Miss. And Stephanie at that point didn't have a large selection of Tola Matin yarn. It had mostly sold out. But this particular colour was the perfect one to complete the fade. So let me show you. The first colourway that we have here is called Arya, and that's La Bien-Aimée. And then the next colour that we have, you can barely see can you see the transition? We start to bring in a little bit more pink. That's the Tola Matin yarn, and it's a colourway called Little Miss. And it was just completely perfect, because then faded into this more pink, which was High Garden. And then I introduced this beautiful mohair silk, which was Dawn by La Bien-Aimée. And the original pattern doesn't have any mohair in it. That mohair being striped in was a modification that I made. And this, yeah, honestly, this pattern used up almost every single scrap of my yarn. So I just kind of went until I had no more of each skein. And then it's got this big I-cord cast off, and I went up a needle size, which is what I quite often do on my I-cords for shawls, although with the Rocket Tee I have now learned not to do that with a garment. And when I finally got to the very end, I think I had about that much yarn left. It was the most epic game of yarn chicken I've ever played in my life, and I won. So there we go. You can see again this beautiful shape, and it is massive. And I think, so I have 2 skeins of this beautiful Kinross lace. Each skein I think is 800 meters. So I have 1600 meters, which is the equivalent of 1600 meters for these other 2 Garter Goodness shawls, but they are 4-ply or fingering weight, whereas this is lace weight. So this might end, I'm knitting it on the same size needles as recommended in the pattern, which is 3.75s. So I think it might end up a little bit smaller, but not massively so. So the plan is just to keep knitting until I run out of yarn. So that's the extent of my plan. And I am knitting it on my trusty Chiagu needles. I love the red laces. I love their sharp tips, which you can see here. But mostly I love the red lace, which has a stainless steel core, and so it doesn't hold a memory. So it stays, sometimes when you have cables for your circular needles, the cable will hold the memory of being wound up, so in storage, which means that when you're knitting with it, particularly if your yarn is light like this is, then it starts to kind of bunch or twist. But with the Chiagu, it doesn't hold that memory, so it always stays straight, and it just makes shawl knitting so much easier, particularly when you are using lightweight yarn, and particularly when you're doing lace knitting because of the sharper tips. Really, the only lace knitting I'm doing here is adding in an occasional eyelet, so I don't think that really counts. But it is lace weight yarn, so so there we go. That is the end of the boho blush and the beginning of the Garter Goodness shawl. I've knitted on this the last couple of evenings, and it's just so much fun. I'm just really, really enjoying it. It's just so relaxing, and I can feel myself desperate to do some more on it. So I'm sure there will still be plenty for me to do on the train. I don't think I'll finish it before then. But there we go. So that's one of my works in progress. The other work in progress, you've also seen before. I'm going to have a slurp of my water, I think. So, The second work in progress is this one. Make sure that it doesn't come off the needles. It's being knitted in linen, and linen is very slippy and is desperate to come off your needles at all possible occasions. So here it is. This is the Sealies, and it's by Anna Maltz. And this is what mine looks like so far, which, you know, when you see it like that, it doesn't really give a good impression of what it's going to be. So I'm going to pop a picture up of what it will look like when it's all grown up. But basically, it's a 4-row repeat. One of those rows has a particular stitch pattern that I think Anna Maltz has devised. And the rest of it is actually just knitting in the round. So it's actually a very easy piece to knit. And it says to use like a darker colour for yarn A and a lighter or brighter colour for yarn B, which then kind of creates almost looks like an optical effect. So when it's washed and blocked, this is kind of what it will look like. Now this is a massively oversized summer top. The idea of this is that it's something that you can throw over, and it's going to be light and it's going to be cool and it's going to be beautiful. I'm really excited about this. I think it will be absolutely gorgeous. I know my colours are quite intense, but I rather like that. So the yarn that I'm using is Lithuanian linen, and I picked that up from Midwinter Yarns at 2 different events. So I picked up this lovely aubergine, again blowing out terribly, sorry. This lovely aubergine shade I picked up from Edinburgh Yarn Festival, possibly 2018, I think. Maybe 2019, not sure. Anyway, a while ago. And the bright pink I picked up again at Perth Festival of Yarn in 2021. And I was thinking about summer knitting and summer projects, and I just decided that this would be a really fun combination. I have 2 skeins of each. Each skein is 450 meters, so I have plenty to knit this top. And basically you just knit in the round doing this particular stitch pattern until you come up to the arms, and then at that point you start to divide for the sleeves and things. But it's a really very easy knit. It will be beautiful, I think. I'm really excited about it. I'm reminded actually about how much I love to wear linen in the summertime and how incredible it feels against your skin, and how much it softens up when it's washed as well. It can be a little bit hard on your hands when you're knitting with it, but once you've washed them, it just continues to get softer and softer. I'm just going to hold that up again so you can see. Isn't that beautiful? I think this is going to be a really stunning piece, and I'm thinking that I can wear it over the top of cami tops and leggings, or I can wear it over the tops of dresses, or it can be a poolside cover up, or yeah, all kinds of ways I think that you could wear this through the summer. I think it will be a really good piece to wear, and yeah, I'm really excited by it. I find it very difficult to put down once I get started on it, but like I said as well, because I'm knitting it with these metal needles, and the linen already is very slippy, it's come off my needles a couple of times, and I've had to go back and catch my stitches before they dropped. So yes, that's a slight problem. The other issue that I had with this actually was I had a false start with it. So I decided I was going to knit the 3rd size, and I think it said for that size to cast on 360 stitches. So I cast on, and it says to do a cable cast on because you want a cast on that's stable. Yeah, you don't want a stretchy cast on for this hem. So I cast on with a cable cast on 360 stitches, and then I knitted up to the first row of pink, might even be the second row of pink, when I discovered that I had twisted my cast on. And I was actually knitting one great big Mobius strip, which was not really the garment I was going for. So I had one of those moments where you just sit and you think, oh, like it's so many stitches. It's so many stitches, and I'd spent like the day, well, the morning and part of the afternoon, working on it. And I was just really frustrated. And I thought, this is very much like when you have to rip off a plaster. You just have to take it off your needles and you have to wind it back onto your cakes, and then you have to cast it back on and take more care when you're joining in the round not to twist your cast on. So I took it off the needles, and actually that gave me the first sense of what the circumference of this garment was going to be at a size 3. And it was absolutely huge. It was so big. So I decided then and there that actually it'd been a really good idea to twist the cast on and to rip it off, to take it off the needles, because now I was going to knit the size 2 instead. So I dropped down a size, which I think reduces the positive ease by about 4 inches, which, to be honest, will still be massive. It will still give me that really oversized look that I'm going for, and it means I don't have as many stitches to work on. And so then I knitted it, as it tells you actually in the pattern, to knit 1 round before you join in the round, and or you knit 1 row before you join in the round, just really took a lot of care when joining my yarn, my round, to make sure that I hadn't twisted the stitches. And fortunately, second time lucky, I hadn't, so I could continue on, and that's where we are so far now. So after that bit of a false start, I have made a good time, I think, and I think this will also be a really nice project to take with me on my trip, which isn't happening for a little while yet, but it is coming up. So I am kind of keeping an eye to what would be nice to have on the needles, what would be nice to have just off the needles, and this would be a lovely project for either. So there we go, that's the Sealies by Anna Maltz, and in Lithuanian linen from Midwinter Yarns. Like I said, in the show notes I will include links to all of these places that I'm referring to, so you can, if you want to get yourself some Lithuanian linen, and I recommend that you do because it is a beautiful yarn to knit with in the summertime, I will leave a link there for you to follow through. Okay, so that's what's on my needles, but what is going to be jumping on my needles next? Because like I said, now that I have finished the jumpers for the children, I can cast on whatever I like, and I've knitted things for my husband this year as well, so I'm feeling pretty good. And so I'm just going to cast on something else. In fact, I'm going to swatch for it maybe even later today. Now, last episode I showed you some yarn I had picked up from Ginger Twist, and it was this Kremke Soul Wool in Reborn Jeans, and it's a beautiful yarn. It is recycled denim with a little bit of, I think, polyester, in order to kind of hold the yarn together, the fibres together, and even the polyester is made from recycled bottles. The yarn is not dyed because they wanted to reduce the amount of water and dye they were using, so it's a very thoughtful yarn. And it is listed as a worsted weight, but it is 300 meters per 100 grams. Now, my friend Jen has done a lot of swatching with this yarn, and she's discovered that although you would expect 300 meters at 100 grams to actually be sport weight, that it is actually knitting up more like a worsted weight after all. So I was thinking about DK weight, worsted weight patterns that I could do with my yarn, and I think I bought four skeins altogether. So I have 1,200 grams, meters of this beautiful worsted weight yarn. You can see this is the darkest colourway that they do. Not quite black. And so I was trying to decide what I wanted to knit with it, and I was thinking maybe the white horses. I've knitted 2 of those already as well. It's a pattern, a cycle, by Caitlin Hunter, because I love that pattern. My other 2 jumpers from that design are just lovely, and I wear them a lot through the summer. But then Sari Nordland came out with the poetry pullover. And I'll pop an image up of that just now so that you can see it too. It is absolutely beautiful. Now, it might look a little bit familiar because Sari has used this particular stitch pattern in a few jumpers now. In fact, a few jumpers, a shawl and a pair of socks. So the 2 jumpers that she's designed this for already, one was a lighter weight and one was a heavier weight. I think one was fingering and one was DK. But they were both knitted with a different construction. So the sleeves are plain. It looks like it's got a raglan or set-in, and I think it's knitted possibly bottom up. So she decided that she wanted to convert that stitch pattern for knitting a top-down yoked jumper. So, and I'm just all over it. I love the kind of sweatshirt look of it, but I love this stitch pattern. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And when I think of it in this yarn, I think this would just be a really wearable garment that would take me through the summer, because I live in Scotland. We do not get warm summers or hot summers. We get some warm days, but you know, a jumper that's knitted in kind of a lightweight cotton, but a slightly heavier gauge with that stitch pattern, I think would just be really, really lovely. So I know that this yarn is quite unusual because of this, 300 grams, but in worsted. So I am going to definitely swatch and make sure that I am getting gauge and that it looks like a fabric that I'm happy with. And then I'm going to take it from there. So hopefully next time I share it with you, I will have some progress on that, because this is definitely next. So yes, in fact, Sari has so many beautiful summer patterns. She has lots of lovely patterns anyway, but I really appreciate the fact that she is designing and developing so many beautiful summer knits. And so if you are looking for a summer knit, whether that is a longer sleeved pullover like this one, which you might not consider to be a summer knitting project, or whether it's a beautiful tee or a tank or a vest, a camisole, she has some really lovely options. So I recommend that you check her out. Okay, so that's all the knitting. Do you want to see what's new to me? Okay, so the first new to me thing was a beautiful and amazing gift that was sent to me by another podcaster called Ruth Loves, her podcast is called Ruth Loves to Knit, and Ruth sent to me an amazing package because she saw that I was knitting with this black yarn. I'd knitted with the charcoal yarn first and then this black yarn, and that actually I was getting on okay with it. And she had tried to cast on and knit I think it was a cabled jumper in this kind of charcoal DK, and she was really struggling with the stitches. And it's really difficult to see our stitches, particularly when we're doing more complex patterns, particularly when we're not getting the light, or if it's a dark day, or and I know there are various different options for artificial light, But for some reason, I know for me, my stitches still play tricks on me. So so she decided that she wasn't going to knit with this yarn after all, and she would really like it out of her stash, and so she sent it to me. How amazing is that? Thank you, Ruth. So here it is. This is JC Rennie, and it's in the Super Soft DK. It is 171 meters per 50 gram ball. It's 100% wool. It feels really lovely, and she sent me 10 balls of it, which is amazing. So I have all this beautiful charcoal DK to make something really amazing. So I think I'm going to cast something on when I get back from my holidays, so that I still have the light to work with the dark yarn, but that it's going to be something a little bit heavier weight that will do me into autumn. Although I have a feeling that after my other two children see Xander's black Gansey, that this might get snaffled and might get assigned to a different project. But for the moment, I am dreaming of it for myself. So I need to come up with some nice pattern ideas, and I'm sure I will. So yes, that's something to dream about just now. But thank you so much, Ruth. That was so incredibly kind. And you really should go and check out Ruth's podcast. She is a very enthusiastic shawl knitter, much like myself. And actually, she and Fernanda of the Little Monkeys and Me podcast, which is also a really lovely podcast that you should go and check out, are doing a shawl cal. I think it launches in July and goes until September. So Ruth shared some of the details about that in her most recent episode. So if you are interested in a shawl cal to take you through the summer, then you should totally go and check that out. In fact, I think I might be able to join in with my garter goodness. So we'll see. Okay, so next thing that I bought was, or that came into my life, I did actually buy it. My friend Jen and I popped into Kathy's Knits, which is another yarn shop in Edinburgh. It's down Broughton Street, and Kathy stocks a lot of Scottish yarns and British yarns, and she had a lovely selection of Eden Cottage yarns, and she had Milburn 4-ply and Milburn DK. And Milburn 4-ply and DK is a Blueface Leicester silk blend. So 85% Blueface Leicester, 15% silk. And I bought 2 skeins, 2 balls of the 4-ply. And this colourway is called Night Sky. Isn't this absolutely gorgeous? And I have to say that I was rather influenced by another podcaster, Rebecca of the Bea podcast, and she has been knitting, I think it's called a Cadre Cami, and it is, in fact, I think I noted down who it's by. I did not. Oh, it's the Allure Cami by Cadre. There you go. I did note it down. She has been knitting that, and I think she used 400 meters, which is what I've got. So I'm going to have a wee word. She comes to knit night, so I get to see her. I think I'm going to have a wee word with her and see whether she thinks that this 400 meters will do me a cami, because I think this would be really lovely to take again on my trip, because it'd be a nice little project to knit on. And because of the silk content, I think it would feel nice on my needles, even when it was a little bit warmer. Actually, I think it's a lot warmer. I think it's a lot hotter in France than it is here. So there we go. That's the Night Sky yarn. It's Milburn 4-ply, Eden Cottage yarn, and I picked that up from Kathy's Knits. I have one last purchase, which, you know, it's one of these things that kind of sneaks up on you. I wasn't going to. I was being really good. I'd managed to not buy yarn in the Woolly Knit sale, and I'd managed not to buy yarn in the Holst sale. I was doing really well. And then there was the Drops sale at Wool Warehouse, and they had the Kid Silk mohair on sale. I don't think I've ever seen Drops Kid Silk on sale before. And I think it's normally £3.85 a ball, which is exceptionally good value for mohair. It is a really good mohair too. It's a lovely silky one. It's got a nice core. It holds up well. I've used it quite a lot and I've always been impressed with it. But it was £2.60. They dropped it to about £2.65 a ball. So I thought that was incredible. And Wool Warehouse, if you spend over £25, you get free postage and packaging. So I bought 10 balls, which took me just over my £25 mark. So I got my free postage and packaging. Let me show you what I got. I got 3 single balls. They're not entirely dissimilar from the colours that I'm wearing right now. This is powder, this is raspberry, and this is almond. I really love these. I am imagining that these will make a lovely addition to some other yarn that I have for a shawl project later this summer, and I'll share more about that closer to the time, but that's why I have just bought single balls. Just to tell you a bit more about the composition of it, it's 210 metres for 25 grams, and it's 75% mohair, 25% silk. It is a really, really lovely blend. So, and I'm really happy with the colours that I got, and I think they go really beautifully together. So that was 3 balls, and I bought another 7 balls of this colour, and this is lavender. It's beautiful, right? And the reason why I bought 7 balls of this is because I want to knit a jumper holding this with a strand of this, which is Holst Super Soft. It's a cone that I bought ages ago because they discontinued this colourway and I panicked. So I bought a cone. So my idea is to hold these two together and knit a jumper. I don't have a particular plan for that. I don't know what design I'm going to choose, and it will be kind of like an autumn knitting project. But I now have yarn, mohair to match my whole super soft cone, and I'm really pleased about that. So there we go. The whole super soft cones are great. It was a cone that I used for the Albion. It was a cone of black super soft. I will show you how much I've got left. I've got 115 grams left of the black yarn from the Albion. That's holding it double. And look at that! So that basically means that I have enough, again, to add to that's about 500 metres or so there. So I've got more than enough to add to a shawl pattern in the future. So I'm going to put that aside with my other cakes of super soft, so it just broadens my options. So what else do I have? What's bringing me joy? What's bringing me joy? Well, the Great British Sewing Bee is bringing me joy. I love that show so much. It's just so warm and loving. I love the community that forms between the sewers. I love the creativity. I love the different sort of arbitrary themes that they come up with. I just love everything about it. It's just an hour of complete joy. I know my daughter really, really enjoys the Sewing Bee, and she goes back and re-watches past episodes and past series, and she's got particular favourites and things, and I'm not surprised because it is just such a joyful show. And I think actually there's such a dearth of television shows that really kind of capture that sense of joyful creativity and camaraderie and community. I would really love to see, more shows like that. I know that things like there's the Great British Bake Off, there's the Pottery Throwdown, there was also All That Glitters, which was a jewellery making show, and I think they've also just brought out a new series of the Glow Up, which is a makeup artistry show, which is very similar in its format. So I know there are other shows that are similar to the Great British Sewing Bee, and I love them all. But I'm greedy. I would like more. And in fact, I would watch television shows like that weren't focused on a competition aspect, that were just focused on the making. I find the competition aspect to it doesn't really draw me to the program itself. It really is more about the making and about the creativity and the inspiration. So, and the craftsmanship. There's something joyful about watching people put together projects and follow them through. I suppose much like a knitting podcast in that respect. But there's something really joyful in witnessing another person's making, and that's, I think, what I really enjoy about those programmes, and absolutely brings me a lot of joy. Something else that brought me a lot of joy, which actually really surprised me, was we went to see The Lost City, which is the new Sandra Bullock movie with Channing Tatum and Brad Pitt and Daniel Radcliffe. I knew it was going to be silly, and it absolutely was. It was a very silly movie. It was very frothy and very escapist, and it's about a romance writer who is kidnapped, and because she has some specific training in ancient languages, and her cover model for her books spots her being taken and sets out to rescue her, and that's the premise. It's very, like I said, it's very silly, and I laughed my head off the whole way through the movie. And I have a loud laugh, a loud laugh in a cinema. It might be annoying for other people, but they were laughing too, so. But I really, really enjoyed myself, and it was exactly what I needed. Sometimes we just need a good escapist, fun movie. I would put other movies like that. I would say Jumanji is also very like that. I love the Red movies, which also provide me with that kind of entertainment. So yes, those kinds of, they're just good fun. And yeah, this one absolutely fits into that genre for me. Very entertaining, very self-aware actually too. And actually at one point as well, there's a really good defence of romance writing and reading, and which I really appreciated. So I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for something very silly and fun, then you might want to check out The Lost City. Podcast wise, again, I'm still listening to How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. She has a new series out, so she's interviewing new people, and one of those interviews was with Minnie Driver, and I absolutely loved this interview. I love Minnie Driver's voice. It's that lower pitch, it's very easy to listen to, and she's got a fabulous laugh, and she's very honest, and she speaks with great care and love and humour, and I really enjoyed her interview. And it was after that I discovered that she has her own podcast, which is called Mini Questions with Minnie Driver, and I think it's each episode is about half an hour, and she also interviews people, but she's like selected particular questions, and she asks those questions to each interviewee. So I've only listened to one so far, but I did really enjoy it. I listened to her interview with David Duchovny. I was a huge X-Files fan in the very beginning, particularly the first couple of series before we went down the big sort of alien conspiracy route. But when every single episode was like a different one that focused on a different case, I absolutely loved that. I totally ate it up. And so when I saw that she'd done an interview with David Duchovny, I decided to listen to that one, and it was very good, and I enjoyed that too. And I really like the premise, so I am going to go back and listen to other episodes that she's brought out too. She's got some really interesting and unusual people as well, not just actors or actresses, but lots of different types of people who do lots of different types of things. So I'll be going back and giving some of those a listen. Another thing that brought me joy was the Christian Aid book sale, which is an annual event in Edinburgh. It is a week in May, at the big church opposite the Dome on George Street. And it is a huge book sale. It's all inside the church, but it's also all outside as well. So it covers a really large area. And I went and I found that they had a knitting section. Now, unfortunately, on the day that I went, the first day I went anyway, it was raining. So all the books that would usually be outside had to be brought inside, so they wouldn't all get soggy, obviously. And the boxes of books were piled on top of each other, and so it was very difficult to look through them. However, I did manage to find the knitting box, of course. They actually did have some cones of yarn, and I was like, I am not leaving a book sale with cones of yarn. I'm just not. If it had been really lovely yarn, I probably would have made an exception and I would have left with it. But instead, I left with the knitting book. And this is the book that I left with, which is, can you see that? Patterns for Guernseys, Jerseys and Arrans. Fishermen's Sweaters from the British Isles by Gladys Thompson. I think this was published in 1969. Yep. And this particular edition came out in 1979. I feel as though it really kind of captures end of an era, you know. So what she basically did was she visited all of these coastal communities and interviewed some of the knitters of Guernseys and Jerseys and Arrans, and asked them, you know, questions and noted down their patterns, and that's basically what this book is. Look at this pattern. It does have some patterns for jumpers. Look at this pattern. And then it's also got these, it's like a stitch dictionary in that sense too. And then she's got these like little sections where she's like written about, almost like a travel log, where she's written about her experience of going to these places. And she's got such a lovely writing style. I just thought I'd read you like the first little bit of her trip to Fife. Fife is the county that I can see from, the region that I can see across the water. So when I look out of my window, I see the River Forth, and then beyond that I can see Fife. So she says, travelling up north, I stayed at Upper Largo with the late Miss Rintoul, a great authority on bird life. She was also a keen gardener, and although we'd never met before, we found we had a great many interests in common. I went over to Anstruther in a gale of wind with frequent snowstorms. There is a quiet charm about the place, especially down by the harbour side. I called in at Mr. Duncan's store and was able to buy some 6-ply black Guernsey wool, and he was full of information and said before the war he had women knitting for him the whole year round. He told me of a fisherman's wife who'd won a big knitting competition, and rather dubiously I set out to find her. Isn't that just completely delightful? So I spent a whole afternoon basically sitting reading all of the travel log parts and poring over these. Just look at the patterns. There's a pattern for that jumper. Isn't that just absolutely exquisite? They're just incredibly beautiful. And then you have wonderful photographs like this. She talks about chasing fishermen down the cobbled streets with her notepad in hand, trying to discern what the stitch patterns were on their jerseys. She sounds like quite a character. I think I would have got on well with her. I think we would have been friends. So, like I said, she's got some jumper patterns, but mostly stitch patterns, and these wonderful little, look at this. Isn't it beautiful? And of course, while I was, when I got this, I was working on Xander's Guernsey, so it felt very, very appropriate, and just a really lovely find. I think I got it for £6, which felt like a total bargain, if I'm completely honest. It's bringing me complete delight. Another thing that's bringing me joy is Florence and the Machine has brought out a new album, and it's called Dance Fever, and I cannot stop listening to it. I think it's absolutely genius. I love Florence. I love her albums. I think each and every one of her albums sits together as a whole piece, but also can be, you can listen to individual tracks and really resonate with her lyrics. Her videos are always stunning. Interestingly, the videos that she's released for this particular album were filmed in Ukraine with Ukrainian dancers and choreographers and production staff, production crew, just before the invasion. So it takes on an additional poignancy, I think, because of that. But her music is really incredible. She touches upon kind of mythic archetype. There's a track called Cassandra, which is about the Cassandra from myth, from legend, who was condemned, I think, by Apollo to be able to see the future, but nobody would believe her when she told them about it. So she was gifted with prophecy, but cursed with disbelief. And so that's just one of the characters, I think, that kind of shows up. And then there's an amazing track called Daffodil as well that really made me think of Persephone, who was abducted by Hades after she was attracted by a really beautiful flower, which is generally thought to be a narcissus, which is of course a type of which a daffodil is a type of. So I thought that was an interesting nod too. But there's just so many really beautiful tracks. And there's a wonderful interview with her from Apple Music. And it's quite a long interview, it's about 55 minutes or so. It's available on YouTube, and I will also share a link to that. And she talks about some of the individual tracks, what inspired them. She's very honest. She's just such a delight to listen to, and she's very much her own character too, which I really appreciate. She's she's like got a distilled essence of her own self, and she's very upfront in sharing that, and I really enjoy that. And I really enjoyed hearing more about the album, having listened to it the whole way through, and then listened to the interview, and then going back and listening to the music. It really did deepen my appreciation of the lyrics and the music itself. So yeah, I recommend that. And talking about music, it was the Eurovision Song Contest. I watch the Eurovision Song Contest every year. I so enjoy it. But usually, Britain, the UK, comes last. We just have, and we have for years. I think we last won it in 1996, 1998 maybe, with Katrina and the Waves. It's been a long time since then. I think actually last year we got 0 points, 0 points from both the jury and the audience vote. So that is usually the British experience of watching Eurovision, is it really is enjoying the whole extravaganza of it, and then getting to the end and discovering that that we got 0 points or very close to it. However, this time we came second, which is unheard of. We came first from the jury vote, and then when the audience vote came in, we went down to second, which was entirely fitting and appropriate, because the audience vote went to Ukraine, and that bumped their points up far enough so that they then went into first place, and that felt entirely fitting and a really beautiful and loving expression from the rest of Europe to the people of Ukraine, offering solidarity and appreciation. And on top of that, it was a good fun song, so it absolutely deserved it. So it was it lived up to in fact it exceeded any expectations I think that we had, and we really enjoyed it. And Sam Ryder, who was the British entry, did a really brilliant job. He was very fun and really joyful and enthusiastic in his approach. I think sometimes the UK entry into Eurovision can be a little bit cynical, not really taking it terribly seriously, And actually, it was just a real joy to see his joy in the way that he connected with the competition and all the other people, all the other singers, and yeah, just the whole community was, yeah, it's just a total delight. So yeah, I'm looking forward to next year's. Already. Okay, my darlings, well, that's us pretty much at the end. So I think what I'll do now is I will share what I was thinking of for moving forward with our oracle card reading or tarot card reading. And because normally at this point I would be sharing a poem, but instead what I wanted to share with you was a meditation from At Knit's End, Meditations for Women Who Knit Too Much, by Stephanie Pearl McPhee, who is aka the Yarn Harlot. So basically I just opened up the book at random, and I chose I found one of the meditations on the page that I opened. So I'm going to share that with you, and then I have drawn a card from, let me get it, there we go, the Yarn Tarot, which I think speaks to the meditation itself. So that's how we're going to finish up, and then I've got a little bit of an announcement. So we're nearly there, folks. So the meditation that I opened up at was this. For most knitters, travelling means scoring some really good knitting time. But what project to take? Travel knitting must be small, but not so small that you would finish it quickly and need a new project. Simple enough to amuse you, but not so simple that you would be bored. The yarn should be lightweight so that you can carry all you will need. It must suit the climate. You don't want to take a wool sweater to the beach or a sun hat to the Arctic. And finally, it must be washable so you can get your spilled margarita off it. And the meditation is, I will remember that it's normal for me to take longer to pack my knitting than my clothes. So on that note of summer knitting and travel knitting, because I know a lot of us will be travelling over the summer, particularly now that things have started to open up a bit more, post lockdowns. And so I thought I would draw a card from the Yarn Tarot to tell us a little bit more about our summer knitting travel plans. And this is the card that I got, which is the Eight of Wands. Now, the little text in the book, I'll just read that to you. It says, rapid change is on the way for your relationships, work and personal projects. Take advantage of new opportunities, but be careful to prioritise what you really want, as several things may happen all at once. Travel may also be imminent. There we go. So one of the things I love about this card is it's very much about movement. It's about momentum. It's about progress. You know, you can really see that the wands as a suit is about fire. So it's connected to the element of fire, and it's about action, yeah, and it's about progress and instinct and initiation. And here we see the Eight of Wands, which is coming towards the end of the suit. And here they've been flying through the air, and we can see we've got like a little castle here, and we've got the earth, and we've got this kind of zigzag here, which I think represents a river. So the wands here are nearing their destination, and we've got this element of the ground, of the earth, coming into play. So it's not all just air here, but it's actually bringing it home. So what I was thinking that would relate to in terms of summer knitting is making sure that we are staying realistic. We're staying a bit grounded with our projects. It can get very easy to overpack our knitting projects and to imagine that we're going to get a lot more done than we will. And actually the invitation is to stay present with, you know, the situations and the circumstances and the relationships as they arise. And I think that's as true for staying at home as it is for being out and away and on our big trips. So that's how I'm reading this particular card. It's an invitation to stay a bit more realistic, a bit more grounded with our knitting, to take the projects that we want to take, and then also be willing to put them aside and to stay present, to stay grounded, and to stay true to what is here and what is now. So I hope that helps you with your summer knitting packing and planning. I'm certainly going to be drawing on that particular piece of advice and that meditation when I do so. And I was also just going to share a little bit of an announcement just to close out our episode, and that is that the next episode that you see from me will be a special episode. I've been planning this for quite some time and it's taken a little while to kind of pull it together, but I'm going to be sharing a special summer knitting episode, and I'm going to take you all the way through my summer knitted wardrobe. Keep in mind that this is the summer knitted wardrobe of a Scottish-based knitter, so we need to take the climate into consideration there. But I'm going to share everything that I have in my hand-knitted wardrobe for summertime. And then I'm going to take you over to Ginger Twist Studio, which I know I've mentioned quite a few times to you before. And Jess and I are going to discuss some of the designs that are in our queue and some of the beautiful summer yarns that she's got in stock right now. And I might even give you a little bit of a tour before we close out that particular episode. But I'm really excited to film that and to share that with you. So look out for that in the next couple of weeks. Okay, my darlings, I'm going to close things out there. I am wishing you all good things. I'm wishing you well-being and peace and resilience and good health, good fortune and good knitting. Until I see you again, my loves.